you have definitely heard about a new Light Emperor from the other side of Azeroth. However, new info reveals that not only is this empire bathed in the light incredibly powerful and a force to be reckoned with, but they, in fact, may not be so nice. As the dialogue states, they wouldn't take kindly to a lot of our races and classes from the Horde and the Alliance. The khaz'algar humans are just a tiny expedition, and this emperor from the other continent is very likely closely connected to the Naaru as he's getting their visions. Last time a light army got very powerful, after the Drenor fell. Are these guys going to be the new villains, and is this going to be like a Yrel's army that has been building up power on Azeroth without us even knowing? They consider themselves the Arathi Empire, the original Arathi Empire. The light army is confirmed to come in midnight, and if these guys return back to their homeland, they might not take so kindly to the worgen or the Forsaken occupying it. Could the fanatical scarlets find a new ally, and are we in for an actual light crusade in the very near future? Actually playing WoW on your phone is possible with Awesome, this video sponsor. You can not only check in on your characters, but you can do things like pet battles and even fully play the game. Awesome allows you to control a computer through your phone completely free, available for Windows, iOS, and Android. It's super easy to use. Check out my link in the description, download the PC and the phone app, and just simply connect it. The free version is great, and you can control a desktop, transfer files and such, but the real deal is the game version with custom keyboards for various games other than just WoW, and you can enjoy AFK gaming at any time, anywhere with sound. Make sure to use my code DORON to get 7 days completely free only for the first 200 people. They also got a smart lock to turn off your PC at any time, as well as hot sales with up to 40% off on Pro and Game versions. Check out Awesome. So, I gotta say, this is one of the coolest bits of lore that Blizzard has done in quite a long time. I know some people might say, we've been talking about the other side of Azeroth for decades now, and really what has been hiding there for years, and it has just been, what, humans, like the most basic of the races? However, I gotta say, with just how many surprises we had gotten over the years, the humans are actually shocking. We found anything from Pandaren to dragons to bugs to old god minions, so finding like a really well-developed human empire like Stormwind 2.0 is actually interesting, and it is even more interesting with the hints we had just gotten from the War Within Alpha. For some reason, people are shocked that Hallowfall is just an expedition, even though Blizzard literally told us this a few days after BlizzCon, and we had known that there is a kingdom on the mainland, an unknown mainland. The only difference now is that they actually told us who is leading them, why they're here, we learned more who they really are, and most interestingly, and the entire point of this video, these guys may not actually be our allies, and this might literally be the fanatical light army of the Naaru and Yrel that conquered Drenor, just the Azeroth version, that has been building up to a crazy extent on a new continent that we never even knew about. Seeing that you already have probably heard about them, I don't want to repeat myself too much, and speculation aside, let me just give you the straight facts we had gotten from the dialogues in the Alpha on who they actually are. So, about 2,000-3,000 years ago, all the humans were united under the Arathi Empire, and before the known kingdom split that happened on the Eastern Kingdoms, these guys had ventured across the sea. However, these guys are not a new kingdom, they call themselves the Arathi Empire, and despite the fact that we always say the Arathi Empire fell and then split into the 7 human kingdoms, it appears that these guys probably don't believe that is the case, and their leader is the Emperor of the Arathi Empire. This might not be vibing with the fact that Stromgarde considers itself the successor of the Empire, but it is likely that these people that have left have been the ruling family, which is interesting as one of them is called Lothar, and as you may know, Anduin Lothar was considered one of the last descendants of the Imperial bloodline. So this isn't actually the 8th human kingdom that we had believed in the past, but very likely the 2nd empire, and I'm guessing, according to their version of the history, the first and the only one. Almost certainly this voyage across the sea happened after the Troll Wars, because it wasn't just the humans, as we learned from the dialogue, originally humans and elves had ventured on this voyage together, which is why this empire seems to be half elven or very mixed with the elves. So far we have discovered straight out human models, Kultiran models, regular elven models, as well as all the models with elven or human ears, so half elves and half humans. What is interesting is that apparently these elves that went with them are elves that were sent to the humans to teach them magic. This confirms that this happened after the Troll Wars, as the original agreement was that the humans would help Quotalas in the Troll Wars if they taught the magic. Even more interestingly, they seem to be riding lynxes that are very likely brought from Quotalas. They may be native to Quotalas, and they're using some words of the Elven language. Now, here this split becomes incredibly interesting. It is likely that this happened some 2000 years ago, which means that these guys had an entirely different developmental path than the rest of the humans. I mean, imagine, 2000 years is a really long time. The place they ventured to is almost certainly the other side of Azeroth, as recent documents hinted, beyond the Storming Sea, the place no one could reach. How they crossed originally, it is hard to predict, but it is likely their airships might have played an advantage, as well as their knowledge of the light. What we do know is that they're completely isolated from everyone, as we never heard about these guys in the past. Very likely on the continent called Avalloran, especially with the symbolisms of the name Avalon from real-world mythology, the mystical island. However, here it gets really tricky. So when I say isolated, you're probably thinking these guys are like stuck on some island, barely holding on. They can't even get back to the eastern human kingdoms. However, by all the alpha evidence, it seems like they might have reached the promised land, and that their new continent is better than the original one. Very likely, this is not just a small island. The reason I'm saying this is because there is new dialogue we had gotten from Ferin Lothar and Anduin. Anduin asks about this empire, and Ferin, that was originally born there, says the empire is vast, very powerful, and bathed in the light. In fact, the empire is a serious force to be reckoned with. This would literally explain the entire pirate hint from Night Squall that we had gotten in Dragonflight, as apparently the pirate reached an unknown landmass and gathered loot like he had never seen before. It is likely now that the pirates had raided the emperor's coasts, which once again signals that they are very rich. Now, dialogues from other NPCs tells us that these guys are very fanatical. We see them saying like how they're bringing the light to these godforsaken lands, my life for the empire, my life for the emperor. And the whole reason these guys even reach this place is because the emperor apparently had a vision. They're calling the crystal Beledar the emperor's vision. By all accounts, they all seem to be sort of a hive mind. Now that brings us to the Hallowfall, the khaz'algar humans. So the new info states that they only arrived here 15 years ago, very likely around the time of Cataclysm, and the Shattering may have given the Emperor the visions, although that part is my speculation. The ever-knowing Emperor had gotten a vision of the falling star in the final battle between the Void and the Light that was supposed to occur in a place called Renilash. Keep in mind, this is a name that we had never heard before. He then sent his light fanatical branch, as remember, the entire empire is light-based, but these guys are, according to Blizzard, the Uber Paladins. So imagine that these guys are something like a much larger Silver Hand or like an Argent Crusade. Instead of reaching Renilash to fight the Void in this final battle, instead they were caught in a storm and randomly teleported to the crystal Beledar. Then they immediately got attacked by Nerubians. They lost all their mages in a crash. Originally, they intended to open portals so that the main force of the empire can actually come in, but now they're stuck. Now, what I find incredibly weird is how crazy developed these guys are for like a half-successful, nearly failed expedition that has only been here for 15 years. I mean, their architecture is insanely detailed, like work of masters that would take a developed industry, resources, and everything. So this is very likely just gameplay. I mean, it wouldn't be cool to find these guys in like makeshift buildings and tents, but it might also be the evidence of what the actual empire is. If they're isolated and half their stored expedition is this well developed and powerful, like what is their mainland even like? We seriously might be looking at the most developed empire on all of Azeroth. I mean, just check out how our alliance expanded after Warcraft 3, and imagine that these guys were literally living in a parallel timeline on this new continent. However, this here is the hint that I want you guys to check out. So Anduin was talking with Ferin Lothar, who is not actually their leader. I mean, she's just a random girl that got caught on the ship, lost her arm when this teleportation happened, and then the Light guys just told her, essentially, we don't really care. I mean, you're going to have to be a soldier anyway, which kind of shows you how devoted they are to their mission and how kind of ruthless they are. After learning about the Arathi Empire, Anduin says he would like to visit once and discover this parallel empire, but Ferin doesn't really think that would be a good idea. She says, to be honest, I'm not sure how the mainland would take to the variety of peoples you all keep company with, particularly you, for embracing the darkness as you have. This part seems to be referring to the player character. Then she says, we in Hallowfall have allied with you because we beggars can be choosers, but the Empire is neither open-minded nor desperate as we are. And then she says she would rather live in this new Stormwind she just learned about instead. So all of this seems like a very subtle villain brush for the Empire Empire and the Emperor. At this point in time, it can really go either way. They might eventually change their mind on other races if the Hallowfall humans escape and they explain that we are their allies, or they might become even more radical. However, all the other hints constantly talked about how they are very powerful, how they're very well developed, so we're not really looking at a Kultiras here, but very likely a new Stormwind or Lordaeron or something much bigger. Now, here is where it gets incredibly interesting. Now, the vision Emperor had gotten has been confirmed to be the same Radiant song that Anduin has gotten in the cinematic, and the Light versus Void final battle is very likely the same vision that Valiant had gotten in the past. This means that very likely the Emperor is in direct contact with the Naaru and the big Light guys, and his view on the Light may not be the same as the humans that we know of. You need to keep in mind, the human Church of Light is very rudimentary, very basic. It has only really started becoming a thing after the Troll Wars. Human priests had visions of angelic beings in geometric forms, and they coded this into words. They did kind of communicate with the Naaru, but they barely even scratched the surface. They didn't even know what the Naaru are. We know definitely that the humans had an incredibly basic understanding because they only really discovered the Naaru and the Light Army a decade ago when all of us did. However, these guys split when this development started happening, and it is very likely that they may now have a completely different concept of the Light, especially as they're wielding this holy fire that they're powering their ships with. It is almost certain that this isn't the same Light that we are using. We had also discovered Light Undead, so they may literally be raising undead with this version of the Light. Previously, we thought we are the ones wielding the fanatical Light. The Empire may teach us the more benevolent version, but it could literally be the other way around. They may be the ones that are like the Yrel of Azeroth, raising Light Undead and sending crusades to conquer the world. This, of course, raises incredible implications for the World Soul Saga. As we know, in Midnight, we will be in the Eastern Kingdoms, the original homeland of the Arathi Empire, where the Light will come to battle the Void in the final battle. Originally, the Emperor sent this expedition to battle the Void. These guys may now bring their full force to our lands, and they may not want to leave. As the rightful Arathi Emperor, they might believe that the northern Eastern Kingdoms are there by right, and that the worgen and the Forsaken must be purged. In fact, even more interestingly, they could find their allies in the almost destroyed Scarlet Crusade. Recently, we had Scarlets transforming into light elementals and claiming that they will purge our stain from the world. Even more interestingly, the main city of the Scarlets was called Avalon, and these guys may be on Avalorden. I know, maybe a huge reach, but maybe they did in fact have some contact through the light channels. The Emperor might have actually known about us while we just learned about him. Of course, it is too early to speculate, but this might be some of the coolest lore that is going to come to Warcraft, and it might also be the first time that the Alliance races are going to be the villains and the fanatics. Thank you for watching. Check out my video on who is the final boss of the War by clicking on the screen, and check out my video on Roman mythology and the cult of Mithras by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.